Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Today we're talking about celebration. Join us as we discuss ways we can better use rhythms and rituals to help us focus on enjoying the good things in our lives. Let's get started. Listeners, today we're talking about the rhythms and rituals of celebration. And as a springboard for today's discussion, we're using the book What If It's Wonderful by Nicole Zakowski. This book is about learning to release your fears, choose joy, and find the courage to celebrate in the midst of fear and disappointment. Nicole encourages us to ask ourselves, what if it's wonderful? And as always, listeners, you do not need to be reading along in order to enjoy this episode. We're just using the material from chapters 19 and 20 to think about and make changes in our own lives. And Julie and Mindy, these are the last two chapters of this book. So that's pretty amazing. We've been doing 2 chapters a month for, must be like 10 months now, because these were chapters 19 and 20.
Yeah, I think we've done it over a year, actually, because we've probably missed a few weeks.
Yeah. So do you feel like you are better at celebration and thinking, what if it's wonderful than you were last year?
I do. Yeah. She's given me things that have, stuck with me. And I think by reading the book so slowly and talking about it, things kind of stick, come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree. And in fact, I know that I feel like I ask myself, even in the dailiness, like, is there hope in this? Is there joy? Is there anticipation? Like there's certain adjectives that kind of come to mind, or, feelings or sentiments that I think are more readily on my mind. And like Julie said, we've read it slowly enough that it's like, eating a really good meal once a month. And I'm just, thinking about it a lot more.
Yeah. Sometimes the book's title will catch my eye because the book will be laying somewhere. Like for a while, it's been laying in the bottom of my closet, and I'll glance at the title. And if I'm having like a bad moment and I see What If It's Wonderful, I think, oh yeah, I'm supposed to think about that.
Oh yeah, it could be wonderful. That is an option.
Yeah. All right. Well, Julie, why don't you catch us up to where we are in the book, chapter 19. Give us a little recap.
Apparently, Nicole, the author, her husband works in New York City. They live in Connecticut. She apparently has a regular rhythm of traveling into the city on Fridays to meet her husband for lunch, and she takes her children with her. And she just talks about how that had become a regular ritual in their lives. Remember, she's from a quiet coastal town, so going into the city it's very different for her. She says rituals and traditions serve as signposts, signaling our senses to celebrate, whether it's a traditional meal, wearing a particular attire, or gathering together in the same place at a certain time of the week. Our senses record the sights, smells, tastes, sounds, and feel of these traditions, and they become the ushers that guide us to our place in a different kind of mental, emotional, spiritual, or physical space. And so there are certainly a lot of different sights, smells, and tastes in New York City. So she said rhythms and rituals and celebrations invite us to new emotional places and spiritual spaces. So that's kind of the setup for what we're talking about.
I love the beginning of this book, and I'll just go ahead and share this now after Julie's recap of that, of kind of where she is, because throughout the book, we have watched her process of grieving, but also trying to be hopeful in the midst of miscarriages and wanting to have children and then have another child and then the abundant blessing of a third child and how to handle that. And so this, I think, is significant that she's bringing in even the place that they live. Children have not been her only difficulty in life, but even, coming to see Connecticut as their new home, and where is a place that they had grieved so much. Now it's a place of blessing, and they've been able to have 3 children. I love just watching her story go from the hope to the blessing, even with moving really across the entire country. Because isn't she from the Pacific Northwest?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yes.
originally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's in a totally different place and still creating rhythms and rituals to help her celebrate each week. And I think as she watches her kids play, she remembers all that God's done for her, the blessings of the fact that her kids are even there and the blessings of what he's brought to them in the Connecticut area and in New York City. And just that ritual every week kind of brings to her mind a celebration of where she is. And celebrating doesn't come easy to her. Like, that's kind of why she wrote the book. Like, she obviously has to work maybe to celebrate. And she said, it strikes me that one becomes known for something not by telling other people that it is important and matters to them, but by practicing it. So, yes, she wrote a book telling everybody that they need to celebrate and urging us to think about what if it's wonderful, but also she has to work hard to practice it herself.
Well, and remember, she's a counselor, so she also tells clients or patients this every day as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and even by the end of the book, it sounds like she's still, I don't know if struggle is the right word, but she still has to be very intentional about it. It's not like, oh, now it comes really easily,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's still not maybe, it's not second nature yet,
Mm-mm. I would describe her at the end of the book as maybe like cautiously optimistic.
Yes, which I appreciate. It's so relatable.
Yeah. Right. If there was a t-shirt to describe me, cautiously optimistic.
Yes. Yeah. It might go well, I think.
I'm hoping it goes well.
Right.
There's potential. Okay. Well, she did include some questions about those chapters. And so as we dive into those, let's just talk about maybe how we personally celebrate relationships in our lives. So she says, what rituals help you celebrate your relationship with God and other people? And at first I had a hard time thinking of this, and I don't even know if I have a ton of rituals outside of what everybody has. So I'm hoping that you guys have some rituals that you're willing to share and that other people can gain some thoughts on this, because, she says, think outside of like birthday dinners and holidays. I'm like, those are the first two that I went to.
What? I know.
I mean, do you guys have rituals that help you celebrate your relationships?
Well, maybe ritual is such a big word. Routines, maybe?
Okay.
I don't know.
That's a good way. Uh-huh.
Right.
For me, hiking and walking, that is a good way to connect with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much with God. Mindy, I think that's how you connect with God, but I'm usually walking with someone, not alone.
Yes.
Just morning routine. I am going to be outside of my porch with my Bible and a cup of coffee every day. And just, things we've talked about before, like Friday night pizza night, like that signals like we're going to celebrate the end of a work week. The weekend is coming on. It's time to relax. Like it kind of signals a shift in your mentality,
Right.
Sitting around a fire as the weather cools, like that's a fall ritual for me. I thought about some other things, like when my daughter's here, we're going to go to Jenny's, like that's just Jenny's ice cream. That's a ritual. Like we're going to do it. When we travel to my husband's hometown, we eat at Big Ed's Pizza. Like, I don't think there's ever been a time we've been to Oak Ridge that we haven't eaten at Big Ed's Pizza.
Wow.
And it takes me back to our dating years when I first met him. It's for him, it reminds him of his mother because his mom passed away when he was young and he remembers eating there with her. It's right next to the high school football stadium. Like there's just all kinds of great memories there. And we like to do all those sentimental things. But as far as to help me connect or celebrate God, I put going to church. And I thought, I don't know if that should be a ritual or a rhythm. Like, I don't know if I should think of it as that. Like, is this just a habit? But I need to go to church. Like, it's a connection point in my week to reflect on God's provision and his power and to celebrate who he is, what he's done, and to trust what he's still going to do in our lives. So for me, that's a ritual. That's a regular rhythm in our lives that I really need.
I think that probably church maybe needs to be a ritual because I don't know that I always really feel like going. You know what I'm saying? Like It just needs to be something that's a rhythm and a ritual. And then
Right.
as you do the things for it, you get more in the mood for it. Does that make sense? Like maybe when you first wake up, you really just want to sleep in, but I think that then the things that surround it maybe prepare your heart, and then by the time you're there, you're kind of ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess you'd like to think, I just want to go. I just wake up feeling like that every Sunday, but it is, I think part of it is just because it is the thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want it to grow stale. I don't mean it like that, but I do like that it is just something we do as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. In a positive way, not in a negative way.
Sure. No, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with both of you. And I'll start with the Sunday rhythm of going to church. I mean, it might cost you something to be able to do that. And Marie mentioned sleep. I know one son that would love to just sleep in, but us going to church is a gift in this season of life. If you've lived in different parts of the country, or you've had different situations where you've not always had a really good church home, you might realize what a gift it is. Mm-hmm. And so it's something to be able to corporately worship with other people that are all imperfect with you, mm-hmm. trying to do their best. There's just something really beautiful about all being kind of broken together and also looking for hope and encouragement together. And so, yes, that is, I love that you brought that up, Julie. That was one of mine too, as I was going to say church.
Good.
It's that weekly Sabbath. And then our habit as a family is to come home, eat whatever leftovers are in the fridge and rest. Mm-hmm. We really, that's all we do on Sundays. It is a day of rest. But other than that, of course, I did think about birthdays, but one of the rituals that we have that I've mentioned before is of affirmation. And that connects us as a family because it doesn't cost you anything monetarily. Mm-hmm. It's giving gift of words, affirming who that person is, looking at the growth that has happened in their life over the past year. And so that's really special. And then I even thought of the daily rhythms that we have in our home. And of course, I'm the only one here that still has kids in school, like mm-hmm. high school. And so our rhythm is still that school year. We're in that still. And so being very intentional about right before the kids leave, the first couple minutes of when they come home, the first couple minutes of when Bryce comes home, saying goodnight every night. Like I still feel like those, as much as when they were little, those times we're very intentional about, because if you come in and it starts off bad, but then it gets good and then it ends bad, well, all you're going to think about is the bad. It always seems like you remember the first interaction and the last interaction mm-hmm. with someone. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I want those to be positive and loving and affirming. And so those times are still very important in my day. I still feel like I am very much parenting, but also loving and affirming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there definitely are. I mean, I think if we break it down, we do have a lot of rituals. I was even thinking about this is maybe a small ritual, but I just feel like it's kind of a celebration. Like when you finish cleaning up the kitchen, you turn out the light, you go put your pajamas on, and then you get to relax. Like that's a celebration of relaxation.
Yes.
And like the day has shifted. And doesn't your mood like immediately change? It's like, okay, I'm not thinking about those other things anymore. Now it's time for this, whether it's a movie or a book or I don't know, hanging out or whatever, but we're done with the day. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like done with the day rituals just as much as I like morning rituals.
Mm-hmm. Oh, beautiful.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the potential barriers to us practicing rituals regularly. And I was thinking about that we all go through so many different changes in a family. Kids get older, they change, they get busier schedules. Some of your kids might have already moved out. I feel like that's maybe one of the biggest barriers right now in my own life to maybe establishing mm-hmm. rituals and rhythms, and then also practicing them on a regular basis, because it seems like with kids in college, they're either home for like a real intensive period of time, or they're completely gone. And so it's hard to really you don't know what your rhythm should be because you just get into one rhythm and then the life is completely different.
Right. Or when kids leave, it can feel like, oh, that ritual just won't be the same, so let's just don't do it. Or, it's not going to be as good. And so you just kind of don't feel like doing them sometimes. I know that's how I felt. Like if everybody can't be here, then it's just not going to happen. And I think I've talked about that before. Like that wasn't the best decision, but for the ones that are here.
Yeah. Commiserating with you, Julie. I remember feeling that way very much. It was hard to get past that feeling of, oh, everyone's not here. We can't do X. We're not going on vacation because not all of us can go.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have to work through that and find either just accept that everybody can't be there or tweak it and find new ways to develop rituals and routines. But for me right now, I really thought I just don't feel like it. That was my answer. That was my barrier.
You don't feel like that's why you don't do your rituals is because you just don't feel like
I just don't feel like it. And I loved that she addressed that. She said, we can celebrate that the person and presence of Jesus gives us a permanent reason to rejoice. And that's really kind of what just motivates me to get up and still do things regardless of how our circumstances are, because good things continue to happen. Like, I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but we have a new grandson. I haven't said that on the podcast. He was born a month early, and so now he is 6 weeks old. And that's a reason to celebrate. Like that is a good thing. And like it's my mom's birthday this week. And another big thing is she's living with us now. And I asked her, I said, hey, your birthday's, tomorrow. What do you want to do? And she's like, let's just don't do anything. And it was kind of like in light of where John is, like, there's just no reason to celebrate. And I was like, no, we're doing it. Like, we're a birthday family. We do birthdays big. Like, we're not going to stop now. And she was kind of doing it out of like, well, like she just didn't want to impose or whatever. And I just thought, no, I mean, celebrations, and the author said that celebrations aren't always convenient, like they don't happen at a time maybe when your emotions are in line with with feeling like celebrating, but we're going to do it anyway. Yeah, that's really good, Julie. That's good insight. I guess that goes along with not going to church even when you don't feel like it.
True.
Right. Celebrating might feel like it costs you something. Sleep, with a teenager and trying to get up and go to church. But I do feel the older I get, I don't know if the season I'm in or what, I hate to blame my age, but I just feel more tired. I feel more lazy. I feel like, can't we just simplify all the things?
We don't want any complicated rituals.
Can this be first thing in the morning before I lose motivation? But I mean, it costs sleep, or it costs money, or it costs traveling, or it costs sleeping in a bed that's uncomfortable, or it requires these things, which I do tell myself, like, well, I ask, am I going to regret this if I don't do it, or if I don't make it big? And then if I say, yes, I'll regret it, then I'm like, okay, then deal with the little, bits of myself that are fighting against this, and go and jump both feet full on in. But I think about the other thing is probably a deeper issue is maybe you feel like you don't earn it. You haven't earned it, or you don't deserve it, or things aren't perfect yet. So why would you celebrate? And so I think that's sometimes harder, than physical limitations, these mental, these spiritual things that are going on inside of us that tell us it's not time yet to celebrate, or wait to celebrate, or, and then you think, well, okay, life continues to move. Is it ever going to be perfect? And you realize that those are lies. Those are not truth. That's not wisdom. And that's where it's really hard, because you don't necessarily have the emotions, but you know that there is still something wonderful to celebrate.
Well, let's talk about how these rituals and rhythms help us release our control. And if we're a Christian, how it helps us celebrate God's provision. Because we all could use a little help in releasing some control. And we all have things that we can be celebrating that God has provided for us. So what are some of the ways that that helps you?
She uses several feasts and festivals that they described in the Old Testament, like God set up the Passover. So they were supposed to remember their deliverance from Egypt. And then the Feast of First Fruits, they expressed gratitude for the harvest. And the Feast of Booths, they celebrated God's protection during the years they wandered in the desert, and so on. And I think God probably knew we needed like external promptings to remember these things. We're not just going to remember them on our own. And so it just drives us back to God being the source of really all that we have. And so I think releasing control just makes us more aware like of God's abundance and his provision, and less of our own resources and our own abilities and our own gifts and talents or whatever we rely on, instead of relying on him, giving those up. I thought releasing control, like I've had to relinquish a lot of my plans, my dreams when John got sick, and things that just felt really safe and secure. But she talks about like, I think she uses a monkey bar illustration. Like when you are holding on to one bar, you got to let go to grab the next. And I think that's a good illustration of releasing control. Like in order to get something from God, sometimes we have to let go of something else. And that's really, I always hated monkey bars. And I thought, gosh, this is probably why.
So
that
funny.
moment when you're letting go and you don't quite have a good handle on the next one is a terrifying moment. And that's where I am.
Yeah,
Oh
that's
my
true.
goodness.
Yeah.
Well, this really is the catalyst that exposes the lie that we could earn the right to a fulfilling life, to the celebration that we think we deserve, or that maybe we don't feel like we deserve. And so it takes the focus off of ourselves and our own accolades, and it puts the focus where it should be. And that's just on remembering God's faithfulness. So even if you feel that you had no reason to celebrate because of your circumstances or in the midst of chaos, it's a call to remember God alone and his character and what he has done.
Yeah, and she uses the example of the year of Jubilee, which God's people celebrated every 50 years. And this festival included canceling all debts, releasing all slaves, and returning all land and property to its original owners. And all of these actions were a jubilant response to the gracious provision of God. Returning and releasing were intended to remind God's people of the security they celebrate in God. So she kind of tells us that this is just a way to remind us that all that we have is what God has given us, that he owns it all, that we need to hold it with open hands. And like you said, Julie, we have to be willing to let it go in order to receive the next thing.
And I really saw this play out in our move. This really resonated with me because she uses a phrase in that description of when she talked about the year of Jubilee, that was by the people having to let things go. It was a way to acknowledge that really it's all God's anyway, and that we're just stewards. And she said it causes us to keep a light touch on material possessions. And I really thought about that when we were moving, particularly because we downsized. Like I had to let go of so much that I had spent years accumulating, things that I really loved, thought I just had to have, but I had to let them go in order to receive something new. And it wasn't less, it was just different, and possessions, are just really fickle. Like some of the things that I just thought I had to have and could never let go suddenly were very easy to let go when I kind of could see what I was going to next. We don't always get to see that. But
Right.
I jokingly say that I have developed a new rhythm and ritual, and it's going to Goodwill, and I'm still doing it.
To replace things?
To get rid of more stuff. Like I thought I downsized, but no, I need to do more. I'm sure my neighbors wonder, like, because we moved my mom in, so all this stuff was coming into the house, and then the next day more goes out. They probably wonder, like, what are they doing?
Is she running a business or something?
Yeah. But it just reminded me of like our abundance through the years, like how good God has been to us and how much we have, and that I'm at a place where I can just give that away. Like it's just, I'm just grateful. Like I even have it to give away, if that makes sense.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how might celebration be an invitation for you to release the false securities in your life? You kind of alluded to this, Julie. Maybe those things that you were holding on to. Maybe sometimes the reason we don't want to let go of the monkey bar is because the one that we're holding on to is so secure. It's a false sense of security. We don't want to move forward, even though it looks like something good might be happening. We're still afraid to let go.
Yeah, because you have such a good grip on that one.
Yeah.
So you got to let go of one hand. It's gonna weaken your grip.
Well, you don't always realize the identities that you take pride in until they're stripped away. You don't always realize the things that you find security in until they're gone. And then you realize how tightly you were holding on to those things. And so anytime any one of us, you realize just how much importance you had put on that thing in your life. And I appreciate Julie's testimony there about moving. And I certainly felt that when our main source of income was taken from us and Bryce lost his job. I mean, I can't tell you, but it became very real to me why the Bible calls praise a sacrifice. It's called a sacrifice of praise. And it's very daily to release to the Lord and to know. I would have told you before that, yeah, he's my provision. Yes, he's our provider. Yes. Well, then those things become very, very real. When you don't have anything else to hold on to, you realize he really is. And to be okay with that, or at least to find contentment in that when you don't know where your future is going to lead, is a very vulnerable but beautiful place to be in that type of broken situation. And so it is a sacrifice of praise. And I think it's one of the best gifts the Lord has given Bryce and I that season of just training our eyes and making us realize that he really is our provider. He really is our protector. And he has himself for us, even when you're living in the midst of suffering or chaos.
Yeah, he is the source of strength and our security, and he is certain when everything else is uncertain. When that's tested, yeah, I found for me, it was most of my life, it's been easy to say those things. And now it's like, wow. And I'm not saying I'm doing the perfect job or a good job. I'm just saying it really is true that until it's tested, I don't even know if I knew what I really believed,
Right. Julie, I was going to tell you, first of all, I love your beautiful, I'll call it a broken example, because I know that you don't want praise for the things that are happening, but you're releasing those. And I just appreciate your testimony of in the midst. And I had a situation the past couple of weeks that really brought me face to face with my own sin. And it really convicted me. And the only reason I'm sharing it is because it's easy sometimes to look at outward circumstances and feel like you're always responding to outward circumstances or things that are done to us. But I have to tell you, I really came to the point of understanding God's love in a way when I realized my own sin these past couple of weeks. I said something hurtful. I didn't realize how bad it was until I really started thinking about it. And I have to tell you guys, I was so completely humbled. And I just was asking myself, like, I don't understand how God could still love me. I don't understand why he still uses me. I don't understand how he can be merciful or how he continues to bestow grace. And that was me. Like, it's so easy for me to say, oh, like this has happened to me. But when it's us, when we're the ones that are doing the thing that's hurtful, I mean, that's so humbling. I can't tell you how convicted, but also then in my own brokenness, realizing that he has like hope, that there's, it's baffling that there could be redemption, that he could fix it, that he could, somehow pour into that situation. And so I just have to tell you, I was just completely humbled, completely convicted. I don't earn anything of, there's nothing good that can come from me without him. And I just was brought face to face with that this past week. And so as much as I hated it, as broken as I felt and as ugly as I felt, being able to view myself in a right way helped me view God in the right way. Mm-hmm. And I needed to see that, and he allowed me to see that, and I'm thankful.
It is humbling. I have difficulty dealing with the fact that maybe I struggle with the same sins. Like I'll get out a journal and like, 10 years ago, I was worrying. Well, guess what? I still am. And I'm really hard on myself. It is humbling to think that God, he says, be holy because I'm holy. Well, you think, how can I ever do that? I just keep messing up. And I think that's the whole point. Like, it's just, I think he wants us to know that that's a standard we could never achieve, but he wants us to, in obedience, and then he's there when we don't, like it's a cycle, like he redeems us and it's humbling, and then he brings us back. And then that's where, to be holy means like, whatever I do, I'm going to glorify God. And so even in the messing up, the repentance and turning back to him is glorifying to God. And so that just kind of helped me picture that, because I was like, that's just such an overwhelming standard. Like, how do you not just always feel bad? Mm-hmm. That was from 1 Peter that I was reading that this week. So the last question is, what's the difference between rhythms and rituals being our help versus being our hope? And I think that when they're our help, the rhythms just lead us to the source of all that we've been given. Versus when the ritual itself is our hope, then that's a false hope, and it's not gonna hold up, because nothing's certain, right. Nothing's forever, nothing's as solid as the Lord in our lives. So I think rhythms and rituals can kind of become a hope in and of themselves, and that's the danger. Like traditions, those things that we rely on, instead of letting those traditions point us to why we're celebrating.
Right. Because in themselves, they can feel empty if our hope is not in the right place, and you can feel really let down by a rhythm or a ritual. Mm-hmm. But when your hope is in the Lord, then hopefully those things that you're doing help remind you of him, because he never changes and he is actively moving. And that really is what it should lead us to.
Yeah. And maybe when a ritual becomes stale, maybe that's what's happening, that your hope is just in it.
That's
right.
And it seems kind of hollow and
that's true.
Right.
All right. Well, let's talk about the last chapter, because that is called The Source of Celebration. And so she kind of wants to end on a high note. So Julie, why don't you recap where we are with The Source of Celebration?
All right, this starts off, and it's a Sunday afternoon, and Nicole and her family, her husband and her 3 children, are going to the beach. And apparently that's something that they do. And she's reminding herself that memory making is a worthy investment, and it takes time. And she's packed up, all their beach toys, the chairs, everything that they need, the snacks, the drinks, the bug spray, and all the supplies. They even want to have a homemade lemonade stand at the beach. So they're doing that, and she's just enjoying the day. And she remembers that it wasn't long ago that this scene, or joy and celebration of any kind, really would have left me feeling uneasy and afraid, because, she didn't always have these children. And she remembers a year ago that she had just found out she was pregnant with their third, and she decides to tell her husband at the beach by writing their initials in the sand, the children's initials, and then she just writes a number 3, like hashtag or number symbol 3. She said, part of me felt foolish in celebrating this good but early news. I was tempted to practice disappointment and rehearse our grief instead of celebrating the gift I held in that moment. But I just couldn't put a question mark next to any of my children. Like she had thought about, instead of the number 3, just putting a question mark. But she just couldn't do that. She had to go ahead and be definitive and put the number 3 there. So after their daughter is born, Jimmy, her husband, is looking down on their beautiful daughter, Annie, sleeping contented. And he says, well, it looks like God gave us an exclamation point.
That
Not
was
a question
sweet
mark.
story. I like that story.
Yeah.
The book really comes full circle.
Yeah. So she said, I'm learning to write more exclamation points in my life.
Right.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about our own lives. Reflecting on your own life, what is the message you've received about God's view of celebration?
Do you think she means before reading the book?
Yes. Well, yeah, definitely. Yeah, like thinking about the way that you came into this book, what was your view of celebration? I immediately wrote, pride goes before a fall.
Oh my goodness.
Be careful.
Yeah.
Don't count your chickens before they hatch. Like I said, my view is always make sure it's sure before you really start celebrating. I think at the beginning in our first episode, we talked about how nobody wants to be celebrating and dancing around and then have the rug ripped out from under them. So we're always real cautious at first.
Yeah,
right.
I agree. I definitely lean toward the, well, it may not really work out, so let's just keep this quiet.
Right. Yeah.
Let's, we'll just wait and then we'll celebrate. Or like for other things that maybe we have a little more control over, I also thought maybe I need to earn it or it needs to be perfect before we have the party.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
My Christian walk, I know that when I was young, I felt like I had to be good enough or I had to check all the boxes to make God proud. Almost like he was, a parent looking for me to just do all these amazing things. And it didn't take long for me to realize that was never going to happen. And I was never going to be able to check all the boxes or be good enough. And so now in my later years now, I do question. I'm like, well, what if that's not what God is going to do? Or what if he doesn't bring the situation to fruition in the way that I think that he should? How do I find the balance between celebrating who he is and what he's done with maybe something I think he might do, but I don't know. So I don't want to presume upon his will or that I have a corner on the market on what I think he's going to do. And so I find myself even, praying differently, like keeping my eyes on him and celebrating him and praising him despite whatever the circumstances are. So I am more careful, cautious about what I choose to talk about or celebrate.
Yeah, because it's like if you just, go big and get all excited and celebrate, when you pray, thy will be done, it's like, well, isn't that just kind of like a plan B or a way out of your, so you won't be embarrassed or ashamed of your celebration because it might not work out. And so I think if that's our way of thinking, then we're missing what we're actually celebrating. We're celebrating the circumstance, the thing that's going on, not the source of goodness and provision in our life, which is him.
Well, after reading this book, how do you picture God in the midst of your joy and celebration? Like, is he even there? Do you picture him at the party?
Yeah, this was one thing that really stuck with me because I remember when she first asked this question, which was kind of way back in the book, that often she was very familiar with God being in her suffering. Like she knew right where he was in the room, but not in her joy. And I've tried to keep that in mind. Like he's there for both and he wants, and both are important to him.
Right.
So, and that does make it easier to celebrate in the midst of sorrow.
Yeah. I like this quote that she wrote. She says that she's learning to talk to God with excitement about my dreams, believing that he is eager to hear them and keeping my gaze focused into the future with an expectant heart. I talk to God about what brings me delight instead of waiting for desperation to connect us. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, Julie, is like before you might kind of wait for suffering to turn to God. And if you were celebrating, not really thinking about him being there, but she's saying that it's both.
Yeah.
She talks about, a lot of the celebrations that Jesus attended and a lot of the celebrating he did while he was here on earth. And she says, how does his mission here on earth increase your courage to celebrate? If you've seen The Chosen, it kind of gives you a good visual picture of maybe like more of a happy Jesus instead of the picture that a lot of times we have in our mind, which is more of like a suffering Jesus.
Or solemn. And yeah. Yeah, I love the story she shared here too about the miracle of turning the water into wine, that he was probably thinking way beyond that physical marriage on earth to ultimately when he brings us, the church, the bride of Christ, with him forever, and that he was thinking ahead to that celebration. And I just think that's the only thing that gives me courage to celebrate is like how it all ends and how, the grace that's ours in eternity. And if all that is waiting for us in eternity, surely his grace is sufficient to get me there.
I have to read this quote from the book. And I really questioned the theology too. I will say, like, I took a pause and I was like, is that true? That's true. That's really amazing. That's how I felt. And then, so tell me what your thoughts were when you read this. Jesus didn't come to suffer. He was willing to suffer so that we could ultimately celebrate with him. His suffering was not the aim, but a means to an end. Jesus' first miracle was a wedding, but it was also a sign of the celebration to come. Christ receiving us as his bride with all of our stains and scars, referencing Revelation 19.
I agree. There was a big check when I read that.
I was like,
yeah,
what?
I mean, I can kind of see she's kind of really threading a needle.
Yeah.
Like, she's not saying that the cross wasn't the aim. She's saying that the cross was a means to reconciliation.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that that's what she's saying. But when you first read it, when I first read it, I had to kind of read it twice too.
Okay. Yes. Then I was like, that makes sense. Like from Genesis, from the first sin, God put together a plan for redemption. And this is it. It's Jesus Christ, life, death, life again, fulfilled. I mean, that type of redemption, I think we have a hard time understanding. We're in the here and now. We're in the imperfect. And we have hope for the future. But this really it's something I want to delve into more, to really think about the ramifications of kind of those sentences.
Yeah, it made me think about, you hear a lot in psychology and self-care and all of that teachings that to live in the moment, not necessarily live for the moment, but live in the moment. But I just wonder if they aren't a little too close sometimes, like, because if you're in a sad moment, like you think about your life, it's a story. Stories have chapters. Not every chapter is a happy chapter, but the story, you know what I mean? Like, can be a great story. And I think that if you live in the moment, not every moment is going to be good. And you have to think about it as the bigger story. And I guess, and that was kind of where Jesus was going with I think the miracle was to the end, to the very end. And I don't know, I just thought that was interesting about not every moment is great. So, but it's part of a bigger story that we know the end of.
All right. Well, how is God inviting you to ask yourself, what if it's wonderful? I liked her second to last paragraph. She says, perhaps you too have allowed fear to govern too many of your years. That fear has made you comfortable in the dark and hyper vigilant in the light. Right now, you might be tempted to ask yourself questions like, what if I'm foolish to hope? What if I embrace celebration only to have the joy ripped from my hands? But she tells you, that you're invited to open up those hands and release those fears and choose that joy. And so I do think that God's asking us to maybe stop being so vigilant and tempering our hopes so much, and maybe just try hoping with abandon. It's still hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
What if it's
too easy to have
wonderful still seems a bit ridiculous for me. I just can't get there. Like, and I'm sure she doesn't mean like that, death. It wouldn't, what if it's wonderful? I don't think she means that, but just that somehow, God is still wonderful. My relationship with him is still there. Provision, like seeing God work, seeing, those things can be wonderful. But it's just hard when you're faced with a great loss to think about anything being wonderful, Yeah. And I don't want to think of it that way. Like that doesn't seem like right or good for anybody, So, I still struggle with that. And that's probably not what she means.
No. I don't think that she ever meant like, well, what if I never, because she was struggling with infertility. I don't think she was ever saying like, well, what if I never have any kids? What if that's wonderful? Like, I don't feel like she was saying that. I think she was saying something has been put in my lap, and instead of embracing it and looking for good, like she would have the hope of a pregnancy, but then the whole time she would be so fearful. Yeah, I definitely don't think that it means that you would say about John's situation, what if it's wonderful?
Right.
No.
Right.
Because I think about the Hebrews 12, the faith chapter. Well, Hebrews 11 is the faith chapter, but also Hebrews 12 talking about Jesus. And it said, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. It wasn't the cross. It was after the cross. When Jesus died, he was in the grave 3 days. And those were dark, hopeless, depressing days until he rose again. But then he rose again. So that's the point, but in Hebrews 11, it talks about all these, I'll call them giants of the faith, these imperfect people who were just looking towards God and trying to know that they weren't ever going to see that on earth. They were never going to be able to perfectly be loved or love until heaven. And so they were looking ahead. And it says they didn't receive that on earth. It was in heaven that they received that full gift of God himself. It's really hard because we're not promised anything except God's presence with us while we're living on an earth that decays, while our bodies are decaying, while relationships are broken and things we can't trust in circumstances. And so we're living in the imperfect, looking to a perfect God. That's the one place. I know that Jesus grieved when his friend Lazarus died. At the same time, he waited to go fix the situation. He tarried. And that's hard to understand why he wouldn't just fix it with the snap of his fingers. He could have spoken the word and changed those circumstances. Yeah, he says the words, but it was for the disciples' good. It was for their good. And even Martha, I love that he says, Martha, the one he loved, she's grappling with her unbelief and trying to believe. And I just feel like she states it so well. She was like, why weren't you here? You could have fixed it. But even now, I know you can fix it. And I feel like that's where yourself so often.
Yeah, knowing that he can, but will he? Yeah.
Is he going to tarry?
Yeah. I don't feel like we're ending this episode, listeners, on like a super high point, but I don't know.
But what if it's wonderful?
So we're not really sure. I mean, this is like a book club. This is kind of like a book club that we've done this year. And some chapters we got a lot out of, and some chapters were just kind of like, huh. And I guess the last chapter we're kind of like,
Well, no, it is. I think it is the point. You're right, Brie. Like, it's not about what if something terrible is really wonderful. That is not the point. It's about hope and possibility when you are presented with something, to not just think the worst, and not to be always afraid of the worst. That I think she said this early on, like the best is also a possibility. Like a good outcome is always a possibility too.
Yes.
So don't overlook that.
Thank you, Julie.
Yes. Listen to what Julie said. If you have enjoyed this book, or if you have done this book with us, or if you just enjoyed listening to the episodes, we would love to hear your thoughts on this. You can find us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast, or you can email us at midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com. But before we go, we want to do I'm a Fan. All right, Mindy, what are you a fan of this week?
I'm a fan of a dental procedure that my adult son just chose to have. This was completely optional. It wasn't something that he had to do, but he had some difficulty when he was like 9 months old with a high fever, and his teeth, like the coloring didn't fully form correctly because of the high fever when he was very little. So throughout life, it's been something that he's, been self-conscious of. He keeps his teeth clean, but it was something that he could never quite fix, all right, with like over-the-counter whiteners or whatever. Well, he talked to the dentist, and they told him about a procedure that they could do in-house, and it's very much medical grade whitening. So Grant went yesterday. His before picture of his teeth and his after picture of his teeth are completely different. Like, I cannot believe this procedure that he was able to have done at the dentist made such a big difference in his teeth. So for anyone out there that may have struggled with their teeth, really beautiful to see the difference. Now, it turned out to be somewhat painful and uncomfortable.
Really?
Yes. And the amount of sensitivity that he dealt with yesterday was quite intense, but he woke up this morning feeling much better. So really it was kind of like a 24-hour kind of intense, sensitivity. But yes, it's made a huge difference. So I would recommend it. I'd never heard anyone that had done it before, but it's called Zoom, and it was done at the dental office.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. And that does make such a big difference. If you've been self-conscious, then to just be able to smile and not feel that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Julie, what are you a fan of this week?
I'm a fan of a recipe. This is a recipe I tried before my Green Chef subscription, but it's really good, and it's a good way to get broccoli if you don't just love eating broccoli. It's smashed broccoli with balsamic and Parmesan. Have you ever seen that? I think I saw it on Instagram first.
Oh, sounds good.
You take the florets and I think you cook them either microwave or in water just to soften them a little bit, and then you smash them with like a cup or a glass. So they kind of fan out flat.
Okay.
And the purpose of that is to increase the surface area to absorb more of the goodies that you're going to put on top.
Oh, yum.
Sounds lovely.
and to hide the taste of actual broccoli.
Right. And apparently this is a big thing. Like there's smashed potatoes, smashed beets, smashed carrots. There's all these smashed vegetables. So you steam it, and then you smash it, and then you just drizzle with olive oil, salt and pepper, and then a little balsamic vinegar and some Parmesan cheese. And my goodness, they are so good. My son was over when I cooked them, and he would not normally be a big broccoli fan, and he loved them.
Yeah, I'm not really a big broccoli fan either, but this sounds like something I might like to try.
Because it gets a little crunchy, like you can pick them up.
Oh, okay.
And you just cook them on a sheet pan. It's really easy, and it's a good way to eat broccoli.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's great.
Delicious.
All right. This week, I'm a fan of some jewelry that you can buy locally, but they do have a website, and so you can also buy it there. But it's Judith Bright. Have you guys heard of Judith Bright?
Oh.
Or seen her stores? She has one store in downtown Nashville, and she has one store in Franklin. And on the website, it says, meaningful jewelry made with you in mind, one piece at a time. Now, they don't really make just one piece. But I think they are constantly getting different styles in. This summer, I got some threader earrings. And they're kind of like those long kind of like chains that you put through your earlobe, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And then I got a necklace to match. And I've worn them just about every single day in the heat, and they don't look tarnished. Like, I just have enjoyed the jewelry. I got some different earrings for Christmas this past year, and I still like those too. So you might check out their website, Judith Bright. And I guess it says she actually has 3 Nashville locations. So you can either get them locally or you can order from the website.
Yeah, I appreciate that, especially with the heat and the tarnishing business, because
yeah,
tell you what.
Do you have them on
wear
now?
jewelry to the beach.
Oh, yeah, I do. It's little.
Oh, yeah, let's see.
It's got like one stone and then these redder ears. I don't know if you can really even see. For some reason, my filter looks really blurry here. But yeah, I would say it's like an affordable type of jewelry too. You're not spending a ton of money, but it's nice enough that it can be given like as a special gift.
Okay.
So.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. If you're looking for something, go ahead and check that out. All right, Julie and Mindy, I've enjoyed this book club with you. I don't know what we're going to study next. Maybe something that maybe it's not even a self-help. We've never tried doing a fiction. I don't know. But anyways, listeners, we're going to come up with something because it is so nice to have a book that we're doing once a month.
It is so fun.
I can't wait to find out what we study next.
I know.
Me too. Maybe offer some suggestions.
Yes, listeners, if you have a book that you would like us to do, go ahead and email us or find us on Instagram and let us know. And we would totally be open to it.
Yeah.
All right, Julie and Mindy, we'll talk to you next week.
All right. See ya.
Sounds great. Bye.
We're so happy you joined us today. You can find the show notes for this episode at midlifematterspodcast.com. Also, please tell a friend about the show and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. That's where we post pictures and stories about all the things we talk about in each episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.